Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this event being put on by the Canadian-Bulgarian Business Network. I'm Ivo Gorgachev. I'm with the CBBN, and I'll just run us over the housekeeping rules. We would like to ask everyone to keep their microphone muted and their cameras off so that the spotlight can be on our speaker and moderator. For questions, we would like you to submit the questions in writing, either to everyone using the chat feature or to our moderator, Alex Nestor, who will read the questions out loud and pass them on to Mr. Stanchev, and we will proceed that way. So the chat feature is enabled with a button at the bottom of the conference screen. You'll be able to find that. And again, please send the questions either openly to the whole group or to your moderator, Alex Nestor. And with that being said, I will hand it off to him. So Alex, please carry us into this meeting.
Okay, thank you, Ivo. And hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. This is our, I have to say that this is our first webinar, and it's coming at the right time because, as you know, Bulgaria is going through very dynamic times, softly speaking. But before we go to Professor Stanchev and to his presentation, I'll give the word to Michael Rober, who is the CEO of CBBN. And by the way, I forgot to mention that I'm also from CBBN and I'm based in Sofia. Michael?
Yes, welcome everybody. We're very excited to have this crowd from everywhere. From what I understand, we didn't ask for details on the registration form to keep it private, but we have people from all of North America, Europe, Bulgaria. Добре дошли на всички. Нашия официален език в камерата е английски. Имаме и гости от Канада, които не знаят български, затова на английски. На това място искам да благодаря на нашия посланник, нашата посланничка в Отава, госпожа Светлана Стойчева-Трополски, която положи усилия да разпространи новината за събитието по цялата мрежа във всички български общности. Thank you, Madam Ambassador. Thank you so much. We wouldn't be so many of us here if it wasn't to you. A few words about CBBN. We were established six years ago. The founding members, Matej Netkov was already mentioned, our president, and Ivan Popov, vice president. We bring together business owners, business-oriented people, professionals with interest in the field, with the main goal to promote the business relations between the two countries in organizing educational events, seminars, coaching, consulting with companies coming to Canada and going to Bulgaria. We work closely with the embassy in Ottawa and also with the Consulate General in Toronto. We organized two major events. Alex was very instrumental in those in Bulgaria, promoting CETA and the business in Canada. We always look for talent, so please join us. Имаме нужда от млади хора, ентусиазирани хора, които да работят в нашата организация изцяло на доброволчески начала. Така че разгледайте нашия вебсайт и сте добре дошли. There is no need to introduce Dr. Stanchev. He is one of the top analyzers, not only economically. I just recently read his article about the protests for the last 30 years in Dnevnik, I believe. So he's known to everybody who is interested in Bulgarian economy and politics and internationally, of course. So without further ado, thank you for your attention. Благодаря ви. I'll expect you.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, as I mentioned, the situation in Bulgaria is very dynamic, softly speaking, both from a political and economic standpoint. And that's why I said that this webinar is coming just at the right time. I'll just mention briefly the topics on which Krasen is going to touch and share his views. There are 4 topics, and they will take approximately 10 minutes each. So we can, the presentation will be between 30 and 40 minutes. And after that, there will be a Q&A session. And you're very welcome to ask as many questions as you like. They're going to be answered in the sequence they were entered. And I hope that we are going to have a very good and fruitful discussion. And after leaving the webinar, you're going to enjoy the information from Krasen, who brings a wealth of knowledge in the economic and political field in Bulgaria. I also had the pleasure to work with him on mainly on improving the investment climate in Bulgaria. One of the topics, of course, and we will start with that, are the recent protests in Bulgaria. I'm sure that you follow that. And recently, tens of thousands of mainly young people took to the streets of Bulgaria to express their dissatisfaction with the justice, actually with the injustice, and also the corruption in Bulgaria. So I'm sure that the government sooner or later has to take into account their concerns and address them. The other topic is, so we have some bad and some good news. The other topic is, you know, that Bulgaria just a few days ago entered the waiting room for the Eurozone, which in my view is a very good step forward for Bulgaria to join the nucleus of the European Union and the so-called rich club of countries. Of course, another subject is the impact of the coronavirus on the Bulgarian economy, which is, as you know, at the beginning, in the winter months, Bulgaria handled quite well, mobilized itself and handled quite well the situation with the coronavirus. But now the things are deteriorating, and we see numbers today were reported more than 300 cases of infected people. So I don't know how the government is going to react, but we're getting very close to 10,000 cases. So very soon this will happen. And of course, the other thing is also good news is the recently approved rescue package of the European Union. And as you know, Bulgaria will be getting 29 billion euro in the next few years. And this is a huge amount of money as compared to the GDP of Bulgaria. And I would say that it's absolutely crucial and critical how this money is going to be utilized in Bulgaria. And this will be a major factor which way Bulgaria will go, depending on how the money is spent. So right now I'll have the pleasure to turn the mic or give the floor to Krasen to tell us more about these exciting topics. Krasen, please go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to thank everyone for inviting me to speak. It is a challenge. I have relatives around the globe. My son, the oldest one, was living, for many years in the States, but started in Canada. I have a daughter in Cambridge. she's with us, I believe. And I have a daughter in Sydney, even grandchildren in those cities. But because of the time difference with Sydney, she's not here. Starting with the current political situation, it is very strange. So, for one, we can compare this with different summers and one winter of discontent, Bulgaria used to have. On 6th of July, 1990, the protest started in Sofia against the then President Peter Vladimir. So then the next, street discontent was in the winter of 96, 97, with hyperinflation between April 96 and March 97. Bulgaria was in the situation of Venezuela, leading the global charts in terms of hyperinflation. So then the next street protest was in 2013 and 2014. And now we have again July. So the situation between today and 2014 is very different. So I've sent Ivo and the chamber some charts. But if you look at the charts of GDP per capita for the entire period after 1878 to present day, there is no doubt that in terms of prosperity, this is the most prosperous and the longest period of economic growth in Bulgaria's history. And this story is very similar to other countries as well. The same is if you take productivity, the same if you take, for example, household wealth, not only salaries, but the value of the properties, movable, immovable properties. So for the last 5 years, since the last protests of 2014, the disposable income of every household in Bulgaria is about 35% more than in the middle of 2014. And in terms of household wealth, the new wealth of the households, this is Credit Suisse most recent report of November last year. The household wealth had gone up in the last 10 years by 10 billion euro. So at the same time, protests, are somehow related to the discontent with the government. And if you take the government behavior is relatively acceptable. So there are lots of things which have been problematic. One of the charts I share in my presentation shows the government expenditures, including interest payments, meaning government debt payments, for the entire 20th century. And there is only one country which had such which government had such government spending as Bulgaria. The difference is, this is United Kingdom during the World War II, when the country was heavily indebted to the United States in order to keep fighting the war against Nazi Germany. Similar to that situation, without a war, was Bulgaria between the end of the 40s of the last century and 1999 of the last century. So one of the interesting development which is related to coronavirus situation, I will come back to that later, is the life expectancy. Life expectancy in Bulgaria behaved like in most of former Warsaw Pact countries. So it has been growing up after the World War II until early 60s. Then it remained flat, and started growing up in 92 until 96. In 96, it dropped back to the level of 1960. And since then, I mean, in 1960, it was 69 years. So since then, since 97, the life expectancy went up to 75 years of age. For the last 20 years, you had more dramatic increase of life expectancy than for the entire period between 1945 and 2000. So in this situation, the protests are really very different. So compared to what we used to have in, for example, 1990 or 1997, in this situation, we have a parallel discontent with different institutions, including the executive, the judiciary, namely the prosecutor chief, and the president. In 1990, we had a president, we had a political party which was sort of hope bearer. The same was the situation in 96 and 97. Similar to that was the situation in 2013 and 2014. Then we had a party and the leader. Now we don't have a party, we don't have an agenda, and we don't have a leader. And if you look at the composition of the people, you know, who are on the street, they have two main requirements, or 2.5 requirements. And this is resignation of the executive, resignation of the prosecutor chief, and lack of credibility to the president. And these are the conflicting visions within the situation. If you ask me how it will end, I don't know. I have some feelings, I can share them if there are questions. The peculiarity of this year is that everybody is believed to be to govern from all these three institutions. So another thing is, Alex mentioned that. Do you hear me? Hello? Hello?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, okay.
So,
okay. So another thing is the European Union recovery plan. Nominally, these are 750 billion recovery, plus their 1.1 trillion a regular budget for the 7-year period. But on the top of that, there is 1.4 billion government debt purchasing plan by the central bank of the Euro, or ECB, European Central. Altogether, it goes to about 3.2 trillion euros as a so-called recovery package, because the things are mixed. So what is the amount of money for the government debt plan, and it's related to the entry into the Eurozone? The government debt plan of ECB is equal to the entire, almost entire, monetary reserve of the Eurozone as such. The reserves of the Euro, combined reserves of ECB and the member countries, or countries which are in the Eurozone, is 1.5 trillion euro. And the purchasing plan is 1.34. So, which basically means that the debt of the Eurozone will double, which is some sort of a very dangerous situation, because all this cash should be either written off, these whatever government plans, to buying government debt, Most of it is, of course, Italy, but even more than Italy is purchasing of the German government debt. So these two countries will basically sell to the ECB about 650 billion debt, which basically leads to either an inflation, or if the ECB starts raising this money on the market, not monetizing the debt or not returning off the debt, this would mean that the interest rates will go up or the inflation will go up. So the situation is not very promising, in general. As to the budget, this 29 billion, for all the countries, these relatively well distributed segments of cash rain. At the same time, this is just a figure. These figures the preconditions are that at the moment, by end of October, the governments are required to prepare a plan how they will spend the money allocated for each individual country. As to the conditionalities, there are two basic conditionalities. Number one is the so-called democratic or EU values, which are written in Article 2 and 3 of the treaty, of the Lisbon Treaty and the Treaty of the Functioning of the European Union. And number two conditionality is the rule of law. So the tricky thing here is that there is no enforcement mechanism. 2 days ago, the enforcement mechanism was somehow designed, which is more of a compromise rather than a real mechanism of enforcement. Because, for example, in the rule of law, you would not have a conditionality or understanding of the rule of law in terms of missing or lacking expropriation. The rule of law would mean application of the European Union law. As to the democratic values, this is mostly elections and freedom of speech, nothing else. So the mechanism is that one country may require, through the Council of the European Union, may require that the money allocated for an individual member country is freeze for a period of not more than 3 months. And then it might be stopped only with the unanimous agreement of all the members of the Council, of all the member states of the European Union, which is unlikely to happen. And this is also important in terms of the expectations of both political developments in Bulgaria and the role of the European Union in resolving internal political challenges. I don't think, the European Union may play, at least with this setting, with the recovery package and everything else related to the fiscal philosophy of the next 7 years. I don't think, that any of these conditionalities or preconditions, the precondition is more important than the conditionalities, by the way. And you will understand why when I go back to these effects, after the coronavirus. So, but the precondition, as I said, was to have a plan by early November. And I don't see the government able to prepare such a plan by early November, at least a plan which would be relatively good. In general, there are political effects of the entire recovery plan and the budget of the European Union. The political effect is bribing the electorate. So Some money is collected in Brussels or printed in Frankfurt. Then the prime ministers bring the money back to their governments and ask citizens to compete to get the money from Brussels. Citizens of companies line up for the purpose. At the same time, nobody can control what is going on, and who is in charge of the governments of the individual is the first beneficiary in line. So this is not but it's impossible at this stage, only EU level, not to speak about the individual countries. If you have questions on this, I can share this, my views on what can be done. Strangely enough, on the day of the protest started in Sofia, the European Central Bank issued two invitations. Exchange rate mechanism, or also known as the euro rating. The circumstances are basically the following. After Brexit, there are 6 countries which decided to wait and see outside the waiting room, and these are Czech Republic, Denmark, Hungary, Poland, Romania, and Sweden. Only 2 countries last year applied for membership in the waiting room, and these are Croatia and Bulgaria. The entire effort in Bulgaria with some hesitation, because until mid last year, Bulgarian Central Bank believes that at the moment this is not very beneficial for the Bulgarian monetary system to enter the ERM2 or the exchange rate mechanism. Croatia had no doubts, and they announced very early, and there was no opposition, official or unofficial, or almost no opposition to the idea that the country joins the Eurozone. So in both countries, this policy was explained as setting the incentives for sustained reforms over time. And many in Bulgaria, including me, including Alex, as he mentioned, including many others, we still believe that it is possible. Although there's some things to take into account. And if one looks at the conditions in which Bulgaria and Croatia joined the waiting room, there are some commonalities. For example, common thing is the banking supervision, macroprudential or the macroeconomic planning, anti-money laundering is basically a similar requirement.
Krasen, do you hear me? Hello? Krasen?
Yes.
I'm sorry, but I have to let you know that from time to time you're cutting off for a few seconds.
Can I?
I don't know why this is happening, but I think what we can do is, if that happens, I'll let you know, and you can wait for a few seconds.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, right now you're okay.
Alex.
Yeah, you're okay now. Krasen? Does anybody hear Krasen?
No, he is cutting out for a few seconds at the time.
So if I take out this, do you hear me now? Probably it's because of the earphones.
Could be. We hear you now, yes.
Probably this is the earphones. Okay.
Could be. Let's try it.
So, so there are some differences between Bulgaria and Croatia, and Bulgarian conditionality. So requirement for continued reforms are much more difficult than in Croatia, because the next requirement for Croatia is statistical and reducing the administrative burden on the economy. So in Bulgaria, we have a non-banking financial sector supervision, which is basically insurance. It is not well performed. And this is not well performed because of lack of competition and hidden forces in the non-financial sector, especially the insurance, which block the participation of foreign institutions and development of appropriate packages of insurance products. And this is mostly because of hidden influence of organized crime, by the way. Another thing which is important for Bulgaria, this is the performance of the state-owned enterprises. So this is an old requirement. Last year, Bulgaria adopted a law on state-owned enterprises. For the time being, it has been accepted as a sufficient whatever effort. But what is going on at the moment is that the state-owned sector is enlarging. There are different initiatives of creating large public companies in water and sewage, in the gasoline and diesel retail sector, and if you add, several other projects, it goes to about 2 to 3% of GDP more government control in the economy, which obviously is one of the question marks which will be asked by creditors and by ECB probably. Another difference between Bulgaria and Croatia is that there is a special sentence which is for the first in the communique, for the first time used by ECB for a country which is applying, for the euro, and I'm quoting: Bulgaria should continue the reforms in the judiciary, fighting organized crime and corruption. So it is not very clear. It is not very clear what does it mean. So one of the reforms in the judiciary was in 2006, which basically provided for a procedure to impeach the prosecutor chief. But there is no one who can perform this procedure currently at the moment, because it depends on the executive, it depends on the Minister of Justice. There is another reform of 2015, which basically increased the number of members of the Supreme Judicial Council appointed by the Parliament. So it is impossible to expect at the moment, a sort of effort, concerted effort between political parties in the Parliament and the executive in order to fulfill one of the requirements of the public at large. Here I come, probably to the most important difference between protests now and in 2014. In 2014, there was a quick fix. So the person who was appointed as a head of Bulgarian FBI, a crook or mafiosi-like looking person, there was an aesthetic element in the protests of 2013, 2014. So, but that aesthetic element, led to relatively quick fix. In a week, the person was replaced, from the appointed position. And in about 400 days, the Prime Minister resigned. So it was visible then that, the corruption or the so-called organized crime situation is not very good. So at the same time, what happened in the last 20 years, you know, the corruption and organized crime was a relatively manageable thing, you know, in Bulgaria. In monetary terms or in GDP terms, it has been controlling, I mean, the organized crime, corruption. It costed the country. It's very visible from reports of the Institute for Market Economics. They do biannual report on successes and failures of government spending. But basically, the monetary figure or the monetary evaluation of public funds mismanagement had gone down since 2006, 2007, had gone down at least 3.5 times, probably more. So effectively, we're speaking of about 500 million misappropriated by, which does not necessarily mean or wrongly spent, okay? Which does not necessarily mean this money is stolen. What we have now as a reason for the protest, we have an anatomy of the entire system. And this involves one public presentation by one of the opposition outside the parliament political parties, which exposed an invasion of a public territory by a private person and a group of his political friends. With the help of all layers of government, starting from a mayor, municipality, the regional government, then the parliament, the central executive, the prosecutor chief, plus, you know, some of the agencies of the government which are protecting, you know, the territories, and they were protecting a territory, you know, from the access, you know, of the public, although it's a public property. It's an exclusive public property. It's exclusive property of the government. And the second case this year was a movie exposing, if in the first case we had an expropriation of a territory, in the second case, which become a reason for a public alarm, was a case of expropriation of business. And this basically led to these three protests. So on the top of this, we have the coronavirus situation. So Alex is right, the situation is deteriorating, but at the same time, Bulgaria and most of the Central European countries, plus Slovenia, Greece, Malta, and Cyprus, these are one of the best performing countries in terms of the most firm criteria for well-managed pandemic crisis. And this criteria is number of lethal outcomes or number of deaths per 100,000 citizens. So Bulgaria at the moment, as of today, is less than 4 persons dead out of coronavirus per 100,000 citizens. So there is hardly, I mean, okay. Slovenia is basically on the level of Bulgaria. Slovakia is a bit better than Bulgaria. Poland is at the level of Bulgaria. The Czech Republic is about there. Romania is about 6-7 persons, but in all other countries, you know, you have the United Kingdom, which is about 70 per 100,000. You have the United States, which is about 40, as far as I remember. You know, last week I checked the data. So these countries, like Bulgaria, they behave better in terms of pure medical criteria for many reasons. There are a couple of correlations which are very important. Number one, our health system is not reformed. There is a huge government segment in the health system. The huge government segment in the health system leads to more beds per 100,000 citizens. So Bulgaria is on the first place in the European Union in terms of beds per, and doctors, by the way, per 1,000 residents. So the next after Bulgaria, with about 100 less beds, is Germany, mostly because of East Germany, by the way. Another thing which is very important, our countries, so the former Warsaw Pact countries, now members of the European Union, we have been forced to accept all the vaccination policies of the communist government. So, and this is for 70 years. Another thing which is very important, I guess, is the density of the population. So we are not living that close as, for example, the east coast of the United States, or Belgium, or France, or even Switzerland. And last but not least, because of the unreformed system, which...
Krasen, you're breaking. Krasen.
Relatively low.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah,
go ahead.
We have relatively, I have only two to 3 minutes to finish.
Okay, because we have quite a few questions already.
Okay, okay, okay. I will should short, you know, the economic thing because of the coronavirus. So we have the highest number in Europe out of the pocket payments to the doctors. So people pay for that, and this brings responsibility. And this is not only Bulgarian phenomenon. This is a phenomenon Bulgaria, of course, since in the first place, 47.
You're breaking again.
Sorry?
That's okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So in this situation, Bulgaria was the only country in the EU with a positive economic growth in the first 3 months of this year. This was the only country in the European Union with a fiscal surplus, not in the first 2 months of the year. It was the country with the highest level of fiscal reserves, almost 11.5% of GDP, which basically means that if the country loses, and the prediction for this year is that the country loses about 7% of GDP, which is about 8 billion left, which basically means that the money has been there in the fiscal reserve. What is going on at the moment, and this is not a major reason for discontent, but it will come as a major reason of discontent later this year. What we have at the moment is that the government is basically still taking money out of the economy and giving back very little. So the burning rate for the anti-crisis or anti-economic, anti-recession measures, the burning rate of the money allocated is about 7% a month of what has been allocated, which basically means that first, you know, Bulgaria has the money, or the government has the money, which has been taken from the taxpayers before, because the fiscal reserve and the low level of government debt. Then we have a situation in which companies affected, and the problem here is with the companies, not so much with the individual unemployed, because in fact, you know, the problem with unemployed is that the employers are without job. And the problem with employers not having a job is the pandemic, and it's a restriction on the human and physical factor of the economy, which basically stopped some sectors of working. And this is not only tourism, but this is across the board. the average decline in sales for all the industrial sectors is about 16%. In the services sector, it depends how you calculate it. So in the services sector, it is about 12%. In the construction, it is 14%. In the tourism industry and restaurants, it's about 56%. In some locations like Russia, I don't know whether there is somebody from Russia, but in Russia, a doctoral student of mine, told me last week, in Russia, the decline of the tourism industry is 90%. So I better stop here.
Okay, Krasen, thank you very much for your presentation. There are quite a few questions we need to address here. Before that, I will allow myself to make a comment. And this is when we go back to 2007, when Bulgaria entered the European Union. It was the poorest and most corrupt country between the European countries. And when we look now at these statistics, we see that nothing changed. We are still the poorest country and we are still the most corrupt country. Of course, somebody may argue that during this period of 13 years, Bulgaria became richer. And I think this is absolutely natural and expected because Bulgaria entered the rich club of the European Union. But the fact that we are still at the bottom of the European Union tells us that there are a lot of issues and a lot of problems to be resolved in Bulgaria in order to move up the ladder of in the 27 European countries. Anyway, I'll start with the questions in the order of their execution, of their entering right now. Let me just take a look. Yeah, the first question is coming from the International Corporate Expansion, NetCorp Holdings. And the question is, how do you feel going directly to the euro? Will that affect prices and inflation in Bulgaria?
There will be an impact, but it will be positive for several reasons. I mean, some of the prices may go down, some of the income may go up. So I don't expect the other way around. Why? Compared to Greece and Italy, there is a
Krasen, you're breaking again. Krasen? Krasen, Krasen, can you start answering the question again, because we couldn't hear you.
Yeah. So I don't expect any negative development in terms of prices and income. So I would expect rather positive developments. First, because the exchange rate is stable and it will be the exchange rate to the euro in which the country will join the zone. Second, there is a 23 years of history of low inflation, which is very different from the countries which had a price problem at the year of entry, and these were Greece and Italy. So compared to Greece and Italy, Bulgaria is one of the few countries which has a low inflation for such a long period before entry in the Eurozone. Having said that, I must mention that this year Bulgaria does not meet, for the time being, is not meeting the criteria, the inflation criteria. But I expect that by the time of Euro membership, the criteria will be fixed. Another thing which is very important in terms of prices is competition. Bulgaria is poorest and the most corrupt country because of lack of competition. So some of the prices, especially some foodstuff, be these sugar, some basic foodstuff, some of these prices are basically monopolized, and they, because of quota system, because of other things, that's difficult to explain everything in such a short time. But the greater competition will bring the prices down and the quality up. This has been happening across the board since the international retailers came to the country about 20 something years. 22 years ago was the first retailer to come to Bulgaria. So this is obvious process. I don't expect, again, answering the question, I don't expect any negative development because of Europe, because of rating, because of ERM2, or the entry into the Eurozone. If, however, the ECB and the Commission in Brussels are serious about the requirements I've mentioned, it may take more than 2 years, which is the shortest waiting period. By the way, Croatia waiting period will be 1 year. So for Bulgaria, it is 2 years. For the time being, the commissioner, Dombrovskis, his directorate, will be monitoring the so-called economic criteria. So, and in terms of criteria, Bulgaria is doing much better than many of the Eurozone. Just two things. One I mentioned, by the way, Bulgaria is the only country within the limits of the budget deficit. The only country in the European Union. Compared to Croatia, the government debt of Croatian government is 86%, 88.6% of GDP. Bulgarian debt this year is about 25% of GDP, and is one of the lowest in the European Union. So government expenditures of Croatia, for example, but for other countries as well, is about Croatia is almost 40% of GDP. Bulgaria spends about 37% of GDP. So there is a room to improve the public services in terms of cash even. So yeah, I think.
Okay, Krasen, thank you. The next question comes from Olga. How would you comment the 4 points of the agenda of the Democratic Bulgaria, Hristo Ivanov, and the concerns expressed by Radan Kanev that the amount to be distributed will be controlled by privileged mafia and related circles?
It has been what we know for about 7-8 years already. So the change, I mean, the negative, whatever, the negative development started in 2012 and then continued in 2013, and that development involved the prosecutor chief. So now no one remembers, but in February 2013, the prosecutor chief was involved in checking. There were protests on the street related to the so-called huge electricity bills and that sort of stuff. So the prosecutor chief started, arresting or whatever, entering the offices of the energy distribution companies, had the rhetoric on fighting monopolies and that sort of stuff. So eventually, it was a system of
Krasen, we lost you again. Krasen? That's very
largest embezzlement, I think, in the recent history of the last 10 years. This is not the largest historic. In 2008 there was another one, but the largest embezzlement was corporate trade bank. Again, with the involvement of the prosecutor chief. And then after 2014, the system started deteriorating. Alex remembers last year, I think, or the year, no, 2018. About this time, with AmCham, we had a meeting at the Sofia University.
Yes.
I was explaining that by the beginning of 2018, there was no person on an elected position, be this in the parliament or in the executive, who may not be subject to investigation by the prosecutor chief. So this system then deteriorated further, and for the last 2 years, we have the key department chiefs, bosses of the Bulgarian FBI, which is called DANS, which is State Commission on National Security, or State Agency of National Security in translation. So we have department chiefs who are bosses of, for example, narcotic mafia or drug mafia. And this has been obvious. So what is happening now, and you are right to mention Democratic Bulgaria. Democratic Bulgaria was the only party which managed to expose all this system and make it visible to the public. That does not necessarily mean that the public is.
Krasen, we lost you again. Krasen?
Managing public properties. So again,
we lost you for a while.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Shall I repeat something? Okay. I don't know why is this, so it's very strange. So I'm not sure what you missed, but what I'm saying is that the system deteriorated in the recent years, in the last 7 years, and for the first time since 1990 or 1991, when the reforms basically started, economic and political reforms. So for the first time, we have a situation in which the prosecutor chief is involved in defending the bandits instead of defending the normal members of the public.
Yeah, which is very unfortunate. Personally, I think that if we have to solve one problem, the most important problem in Bulgaria is to reform the judicial system. If we manage to reform the judicial system in Bulgaria, this will clear the path to many other reforms, and a lot of other problems will be solved by themselves. That's my opinion.
Do we have other questions?
Yes, we go again to NetCorp. While 28 billion European money is good, compared to European 700 billion, it seems low. What are your thoughts?
So the allocation criteria has been the size of GDP and the amount which European Union envisages as a GDP decline of this year. So basically, the size of GDP, Bulgaria is one of the smallest economy in the European Union, although it's not the smallest country. This is not per capita, by the way, which was perceived in Bulgaria and Sofia by the public at large and by the authorities as per capita allocation. This is not per capita allocation, but combined, you have a prediction, which is quite correct, by the way, a prediction that Bulgaria will lose because of the coronavirus. The GDP will decline by about 5 billion euro. So, and this 5 billion is added to the amount of money which is believed to.
We lost you again. Krasen? Krasen, do you hear me?
Okay, loans, but the loans are sort of grants as well, because the payment period or repayment period is very long. It's 2058. So nobody knows whether the European Union will exist.
Sure. Okay,
so
we got.
It's basically a grant too, which leads to my conclusion that the package, the entire package, is basically supporting those political leaders who are in charge of the countries currently.
Krasen, we lost you again. Krasen?
His internet connection is failing, so.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Very unfortunate. Krasen?
Yes, something happened. I don't know.
There is a problem with your internet connection, because now we lost you for quite a while. I don't know, maybe it's time to go to the next question, okay. Which is coming from Tatiana. Hello from Bulgaria. Please, could you share your views on the fact that everyone in Bulgaria believes that the government is going to steal the euro money, and as a result, nothing will be done for the country? Thank you.
I'm not sure that this practice of stealing is so certain. You know, there is no government in the human history, be these kings, emperors, whatever, which do not take into account the public opinion. So what is the likeliest outcome of, if the money is available, if the government manages to prepare a proper plan, what is likely to happen is really to use a helicopter money policy. So you give whatever you can to everyone. So in order to make the public happy, to bribe the public. So what we have seen this week is that the European Union is bribing the countries or the governments of individual member states, and the governments are bribing the public. So what I would have done if I was a prime minister, it's very simple. I would have announced a tax vacation on corporate tax, which leaves about 3 billion in the hands of the companies. I would give them the right to distribute the unemployment benefits accumulated in the National Insurance Institute, which is another 1.5 billion. I would skip the collection of dividend tax, which is another 500 million. and I would reduce the quasi-taxes, which is time spent working with the government, which is another $500 million. Altogether, this is 5 billion left, which remaining in the hands of the companies and the public.
We lost you again.
Focus the government's attention on those at risk in terms of coronavirus. You know, in the first week of the coronavirus, it was
lost you again.
Krasen, may I say something? I believe your internet connection is weak. So as much as we love to see you, if you turn off the camera, maybe this will help.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. That's a good idea. Thank you, Michael.
Sorry, I was thinking of this. How is now?
Now you're fine.
Oh, okay. So even as I said, if I was a prime minister, I would have amended the budget law on the first week of the coronavirus, increasing by at least 50–60% the budget for the health system, in order to pay the doctors, to retrain them and equip them. So what the government did, they promised that they will pay the doctors, and then they are still waiting, you know, for the doctors or medical personnel to apply and prove that they need an increase of their salary. So it's totally mismanaged situation. If I draw a bottom line or a common denominator, the management of the coronavirus situation in Bulgaria is very few things are being done, very late, and under a system, then you go to the government, you ask for help. Unless you go to the government or your friends in the government, you won't receive a help. You need to prove that you are losing money. You need to prove that you are not working because you are a hotel or restaurant owner, and so on and so forth. And it's totally crazy situation. What is working well in Bulgaria, by the way, is the banking system.
Krasen, it looks like this is not helping also. Krasen?
Because they know what is it about. And the system, the banking
We
system,
lost you again.
The cash or the cash amount the banking system is allocating for managing the coronavirus crisis in the economy is about 8% of GDP, or 9 billion left, 4.5 billion euro. Hello?
Okay, Krasen, we got the point. I suggest that we go to the next question because we still have quite a few questions.
Okay.
The next one is from Kalina, and she's asking how deep might the recession go and what factors might affect the speed of recovery?
This is the easiest question. So from behind, no factor will increase the speed of recovery. The decline of GDP will be roughly 7.2–7.5%. What is also important that the unemployment will be 50%.
Krasen, you're breaking up again.
Which will experience, you know, difficulties in their disposable income.
Okay, we lost you for a while, but...
So I can repeat.
Yeah.
The loss of GDP is 7.5%. Unemployment will rise by 48–50%. And the affected families will be somewhere around 130,000 with at least 10 to 12% decreased income for per family. And these are the poorer segments of the population.
Okay, the next question, I don't know from whom it comes. It's what is the future of the coal sector in Bulgaria as a segment of the energy mix? This is the perfect one for you, I think.
Cutting the long story short, nobody knows. Nobody knows because the so-called Green Deal, until the day before yesterday, was 5 times bigger in terms of cash to be allocated for the transition from coal to something else. So with the reduction, 80% reduction of the cash available from different European institutions, including European Investment Bank, nobody knows at the moment. It will be one of the conflicts within the European Union. One of the strange things with the European Union is that nothing which has been in place last year as a policy idea it has not been cancelled. And one of the things, which could have been postponed at least for about 5 years is the coal sector or segments of the Green Deal and that sort of stuff. So everybody understood that, the coal situation or the carbon footprint is not the main problem of the well-being of the world or the European Union for that matter. But for some reason, for pure political purposes, which I can explain, why it is like this. All these things stay somehow on the agenda with less resources to be handled.
Okay. Okay, thank you. The next question is from Plamena or Plamena. I apologize if I don't pronounce it properly. Has Bulgaria signed the CETA agreement? And if yes, what will be the impact on the Bulgarian economy?
It's very good already. So the trade between the countries increased about 50% for 2 years. The Canadian investment, at least in pipeline, is one of the major developments in the foreign direct investment area for Bulgaria. As far as I remember, I made the calculations last year, but we are speaking about 0.5% of GDP investment in line, excluding, then the precious metals investment in Krumlov.
Yes. Have you finished?
Yes.
I'd just like to clarify something here that the CETA agreement is signed by the Bulgarian government, is enforced, but still it needs to be ratified by the Bulgarian parliament.
Yes.
And my latest information is that it's already tabled in the parliament. It's right now is in the commission of the Economic Commission.
Yes.
And it's a matter of time before it goes for voting to the members of parliament. Okay, the next question from Antonina Dimitrova. Can we have an access to the information in writing after the session, please? Well,
This is to me here. And Ivo.
we are doing recording, so I would say that if Krasen, you have no problem with that, we can.
Of course, I don't have a problem. I've sent to Mikhail, Alex, and Ivo. I sent the presentation. I shall add, at least 3 to 4 slides on the coronavirus situation. As I said, because of my and my colleagues' involvement in monitoring the situation, we had developed a special methodology and a portal, which next week goes on web in English. But I can share, of course, the links, to that portal in Bulgarian. So we basically have the system, the methodology to monitor week by week, you know, the interface between the health situation and the economy. Just one data from today, only the quarantine, because of the growing cases of infected people, only the quarantine impact on the economy is 0.5% of GDP this year.
Okay.
These are working time lost because of the quarantine.
Okay, thank you, Krasen. The next question is coming from Željko Andreev. Some economists are projecting a deflation in the next few years. You have mentioned inflation. In regards with all subsidies being given by world governments, in your opinion, will there be a deflation or inflation or hyperinflation coming? How, and then we have how the money will be repaid and how this applies to Bulgaria. Krasen, are you there? Krasen?
Then according to the
Krasen, could you please start from the beginning because we lost you again?
I'm sorry. So I've mentioned inflation because of the Maastricht criteria. Since the beginning of the year, the inflation in Bulgaria, because of pure administrative developments like minimum wage developments, other things, payment to pensioners and that sort of stuff, the inflation in Bulgaria is about twice higher than the Maastricht criteria, 1.5%. So as to the possibilities of inflation because of the helicopter money.
Hello? I apologize to everyone for these technical difficulties. It's very frustrating.
So
Krasen, we completely lost you.
I'm sorry. How it's no.
Can you go back a little bit?
So the inflation forecast is under question at the moment because the money to be submitted to the individual member states is not to be spent at once. So it will be on portions first. Second, the money will be spent about this time next year because of the procedure. So the plans shall be drafted. They shall be discussed with the public in the individual countries and then with the Commission and then approved by the European Council. It will take at least a year. So, and then in between, I expect that some amendments will be made and the experience of the past will be somehow repeated. So part of at least the loan segments of this 700-something billion will be allocated to European Investment Bank. And then the countries or companies will be required to apply before the bank. Not so much, helicopter money thing. So it's too early to say what is to be expected, but if everything goes in a package, this 17% of EU composed or aggregated GDP is a big threat for inflation.
Okay. The next question is from Ivan Popov. And actually, there are two questions. They're quite long. The first one is, you are our famous economist and philosopher. Nowadays, there are different theories and practices of the economic science all over the world. Social liberalism, neoliberalism, conservatism, libertarianism. Where are you? What is the core of your belief? What kind of follower are you in your public appearances, and why?
I will try to answer in one sentence. My firm belief is that every individual and every government shall not harm people and shall not take things from them, period.
Okay. I believe that all people here attending the webinar would agree with you. Question number 2, some people are saying that there is no alternative to the current or the existing government like a ruling party in Bulgaria. Is it true? My opinion is that this is fake propaganda, right or not? What is your vision for the situation?
I don't think that there is a political party beyond GERB, the socialists, DPS, Movements for Rights and Freedoms, Democratic Bulgaria, and the Patriots, which are ready to win votes above the 4% threshold. However, the most prepared party is GERB and DPS. So the others, they show strife, and they are not very much likely to keep their votes. GERB is not likely to keep their number of votes and seats in the parliament. The only party which is likely to keep their presentation in parliament is the Movement for Rights and Freedoms. So after early elections or normal elections, it is very much possible that we will have a parliament of, again, 4 to 5 factions with very difficult procedure for decision making and prospect in whatever sense we would like the parliament to behave.
Okay. Well, I don't know.
This is not what I wish, actually, but that's my reading of the situation.
But what do you think about the newly formed party of Slavi Trifonov? Do you think that they have any chances entering the parliament and have any impact on the political process in Bulgaria?
For the time being, they're moving up closer to the 4% threshold.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's too early to call. I mean, the situation is absolutely strange. As I said, nobody believes that the conflict between the three institutions, the prosecutor, the prime minister, and the president, is to be resolved. And nobody believes they're able to run the country. So on this balance will depend the outcome of the elections. And nobody sees any outcome here. So this is a very heavy competition. A normal thing would have been that the executive and the president, or the executive and the parliament, replace the prosecutor general. But it is not possible to happen because of many reasons, because the procedure to replace the prosecutor general, which is one of the major requirements of the discontent, I wouldn't say this is a protest. This is a discontent which is very deep and long. As I said, it comes from 2013. We made even calculations, Alex, remember, on the impact of the judiciary on investment, and the loss of investment because of this, at least for the period between 2013 and 2017, was about 2 billion euro lost investment. So I believe, now it is about 3.5 billion. So, but we didn't make the calculations. We didn't make the research. So in order to initiate a impeachment procedure, there is a need for, first, 25% of the parliament uh, to come with the initiative. At least half of the Supreme Judicial Council to agree on this, but in Supreme Judicial Council, 11 members out of 25, or 40%, or 45%, are appointed by the parliament. And the key actor in this shall be the Minister of Justice. So without the Minister of Justice, there is nobody to call a meeting of the Supreme Judicial Council. So the procedure is almost impossible at this moment to be fulfilled.
Yes, unfortunately. The next one is from Svetlana, our ambassador. Thank you, Michael and Alex, for the initiative. Mr. Stanchev, thank you for the substantive overview of the situation in Bulgaria. I have two questions in light of the COVID-19 crisis. How important, in your opinion, is the role of the WTO in relation to preserving vital supply chains in the COVID pandemic? Can we craft multilateral responses to the crisis and facilitate trade in healthcare products? And also, how do we ensure resilience of the medical supply chain as we saw PPE supplies became scarce around the world? Where do you stand on the debate about reshoring or nearshoring we have seen during the crisis?
So for the time being, I mean, I will try to be brief. Thanks for the questions. For the time being, the supply of medical material, including medicine, tests, and so on and so forth, has been handled relatively well. Compared to other countries, Bulgaria on this front is behaving better than most of the European countries, except Germany. Except Germany, I said European, not the EU. Except Germany, Switzerland, Norway, Denmark, and Sweden. So all other countries are behaving worse than Bulgaria in terms of supply. This is because of many reasons. Part of them I try to explain. As to the cooperation, I think it is taking place. The first reaction to pandemic situations since the time of the Bible. If you read, for example, Leviticus 13, you will see what is the quarantine. So we, or all the governments in the world, are applying basically the same strategy, to handle a quarantine. But one of the things, we are witnessing now is the interruption of the international supply chain because of many things. The first reason is that the international supply chain is somehow with one leg. And this leg of supply, or this source of supply, is China, and to some extent India in terms of antibiotics and some other medical substances. So, and when you have an interruption of the trade routes, and you have on the top of this trade disputes, I'm not sure whether they're exactly trade disputes, but you have this situation. The situation becomes almost unmanageable. So this, of course, lead to onshoring and nearshoring strategies. It has been somehow in making before the pandemic, before the coronavirus crisis, because of many reasons. So the reason for the global investment and orders to go to China were the advantages of the China unit labor costs or India unit labor costs. So this advantage started evaporating about 3 years ago. And for example, this year, I led a course, for the University of Guangzhou for Chinese doctoral students, and I checked the figures rather recently, 3 months ago. So this year, unit labor costs in Bulgaria, Romania, Macedonia, and some other countries of the Western Balkans are equal to China. So China is no longer with that advantage they used to have, all the companies in China, and the situation, whatever, supply chains in China, used to have about 10 years ago. Now the prices on labor, rents, food, restaurants, hotels, transport, everything is basically the same as in China. Of course, China is a big country. When I say basically the same, this is Beijing, this is Guangzhou, this is Shanghai, all the major, all the northern of China. So the prices are basically the same, and which basically means that there is no other choice. And the coronavirus is basically an additional factor to reallocating the orders for new supply chains. But this is an investment thing, which is not going to happen overnight. I think, for example, for some of the coronavirus-related medicines, Europe, United States, Canada, Australia, they have a competitive advantage, and they will be producing the medicine, needed medicine, relatively fast. Some of the supplies, however, for that medicine will be coming from India and China.
Okay, I think we have to move forward. I just like to make one comment here is that actually we are witnessing that thousands of companies are leaving China for the reasons you mentioned, and some of the automotive companies are coming coming to Bulgaria. Bulgaria has about, right now, the automotive sector has about 270 companies located in Bulgaria. They're strategically located to serve the Western European manufacturers, car manufacturers, and this sector is booming in Bulgaria, and every year is contributing more and more to the gross domestic product of the country. The next question from Plamena, I think is probably more to me. Many foreign companies pay fees in Bulgaria for exploration and extraction of gold and other natural resources, about 1.52%, which is extremely low compared to world practice of 30–40%. So the question is how the Bulgarian government protects the Bulgarian interest in extraction of all natural resources. Krasen?
I can answer this.
Okay.
So I'm not sure whether the figure comes from. So the taxation situation as it exists in Bulgaria is based on the best practice. It is not subject to political manipulation. And basically it is not 1.5%. It is at least 4 to 5 times higher as a payment. Then you have a situation which is not typical for many other countries, because in Bulgaria there is no actually processing of gold or any other things related to gold. There is an artificial gold or industrial gold which is produced in Katsame Group near Plovdiv, which is one of in Europe on this front. So the entire fiscal benefit of, for example, gold production puts the precious metals among the highest taxpayers in the country for the last 15 years or 17 years already. yeah, for the last 17 years, with an interruption of 2 years. 2010, 2011, when the new investment had to be repaid. Alex?
Yes. Yes, this is a very interesting question, and what Krasen is saying, I absolutely agree with that. And Plamena, I don't know if she's located in Canada, States, or Bulgaria, but she could call me at any time. And because I was heading Dundee Precious Metals for 10 years in Bulgaria, I can go in more detail and explain to you why this 1.5 and 2% payment is in line with the international practices, and what is written here, 30–40%, is simply not true.
Yeah, I didn't comment on that, yeah.
Yeah, we go to the next question. Actually, we booked the webinar for 2 hours, and right, Ivo, and we have only 20 minutes to finish. So let's go further.
There's no problem going longer than the allotment.
Okay, good. Then again, a question, I don't know from whom is this question, it says iPad. Can you elaborate on your position on the size of pensions in Bulgaria?
Okay, so I think that there is a great misunderstanding of pensions in Bulgaria in several respects. Number one, the size of the pensions. The size of the pensions, if measured as a purchasing power in the last 4 years, is at the level of 1987. The calculation was done by Professor Georgi Ganev of Sofia University. He holds a PhD from St. Louis, Washington University at St. Louis, by the way. And he's a disciple of a Nobel Prize laureate, Douglas North. So his calculations are absolutely reliable. They take into account the purchasing power. They take into account the prices. One of the problems with the pensions in Bulgaria is the fact that the pension fund was depleted in the period of 96–97, and it took about 7–8 years the fund. What is the situation this year? Another thing is how the state pension fund is managed. What we see in the recent years, and with all the credit, this government has been doing relatively good stuff. They've managed to first increase the nominal payments, or the threshold of income everyone should pay to the state pension fund. But at the same time, for the first time since the reform started in '98, in the last 3 years, the government managed to fix some of the holes in the budget of the state pension fund. This was thanks to the economic growth and labor shortages and other things. And here comes the next problem. The Bulgarian pension fund, especially the state-owned, but because it's very large, it affects also the private segment of the pension system. One of the problems in managing the pension payments or the pension tax is that
Krasen?
every year with a rate which is higher than the economic growth. In some years, it has been disastrous. So, for example, the increase of the pension fund payments because of this minimum, whatever, thresholds and that sort of stuff. In 2009 was 29%. So it costed Bulgarian productive generation or younger generation about 7 billion left for a period of 10 years. So instead of doing this administratively, there is another policy option which has not been applied by any of the governments in charge of the country since '98, and this is flattening the payment system for the pension fund, meaning the higher amount you save with the pension fund, the less you pay, and the lower the amount you pay is equal to the taxes you pay on income. So this system has been applied in Russia, by the way, with my advice, in 2003, and since then it's working. So, of course, they had a problem with pension contributions of big companies because of the oil crisis and that sort of stuff. But they had resolved the problem with the pension fund relatively fast in a period of 5 years between 2003 and 2008. So, unfortunately, I asked several Bulgarian ministers of labor and several Bulgarian prime ministers just to copy that policy of the Russian pension fund. So, but they have been reluctant of doing so, and I can explain why. If they try this creation of incentives for people to save more in the pension funds, be this private or public, but here we talk about the public pension fund, that government won't be elected for a second time. I think this is the explanation. Thank you for the question.
Okay. By the way, we know now from whom the pension question came. It's from Vasco, I believe, Vasco Popvasilev. Vasco, thank you for the question. Now we have another question from Tatiana. What is going to happen with all of the savings in leva we have in Bulgaria if Bulgaria accepts the euro as an official currency? Do we know how much time we would have to convert the savings in euro if currency is officially accepted? Why Bulgarian government doesn't discuss what the impact would be on our economy if this change happens? Thank you, Tatiana from Vancouver.
I don't expect any negative development with the savings. Of course, I mean, there's a stupidity factor nobody can calculate. But at the moment, Bulgaria has the strongest ratio of deposits to credit in the banking system. The deposits which cover the credit of the banking system in Bulgaria is at the level of 95%. The data is for the last month. 95%, meaning 95 cents against every dollar of credit, supporting the health of the creditor of the bank. Another thing which is important, because of many things, but mostly because of the slowdown in 2008, especially 2009, the savings in Bulgaria started growing, and at the level of savings today to GDP is close to 65%. The composition of the savings is also very important. About 65% of the savings in the banking system, we don't know what is at home, we don't know what is abroad, but 65% in the banking system of Bulgaria are company bank accounts, companies' bank accounts, and the rest, 35%, is the population, which basically means that the companies are well capitalized and can survive in all different difficult situations. So another thing which is very important is the spending pattern of Bulgarian households. The disposable income is the highest in the last 30 years. The disposable income is about 63, 64 cents for the dollar, remaining about 30% direct taxes, including pension. And
Krasen,
3% goes to new savings.
Krasen, sorry to interrupt you. Can you go back a little bit? You said 30% taxes, including pension, and then we lost you.
And then the remaining 12% is divided into three. So investment is about 3%, and 4.5% is savings and servicing already taken credit. So the spending pattern or the saving pattern of Bulgarian families is much better than anybody else's in Europe.
Okay. Okay, we are finished with the questions. So.
Okay, great.
Krasen, I would like to thank you on behalf of everybody for the excellent session. I believe that everybody took away the information they needed, and now they have much better understanding of the economic and political situation in Bulgaria. Thanks again, and we hope to talk to you soon.
Krasen, you can maybe turn on the camera and bow to us. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
It was an honor to have you as our guest. Thank you.
As I promised, thanks for inviting me. I mean, I felt some sort of a duty, you know, to do this talk because I know lots of friends in Canada, and not only Canada, but in the United States. I have met personally even some Bulgarian billionaires in Canada. And I was trying to help them, you know, with different donations for the Toronto University, especially the International School of Toronto University, and that sort of stuff. So I donated, you know, some for that effort too. So I love the country, and I dream, you know, since my childhood to come skiing. But as I promised, I will add, you know, these 4 slides on the coronavirus. It was very difficult to know what the audience know about the coronavirus in Bulgaria. Now I have the questions, and I will adjust, you know, these 4 slides, you know, for more information to be useful, you know, for those who are interested.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you once again. Yes, yeah, let's close it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Almost
Bye.
2 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Thank you, Alice, for hosting. This was great.
Thank you.